history of women's suffrage in the United States is a lengthy and tumultuous one. Since the early part of the founding of this nation, it has always been all men are created equal. Since then, women have fought for the equality of the genders. Women's suffrage in the United States began in the early 1700s, where women had few rights and were thought of as property by their husbands. They got nothing from their spouses, in which everything they owned belonged to the man of the house, including personal belongings, land, and money. Their entire life was planned out for them, from cradle to grave. They would marry young, move in with their new husband, take care of the children, as well as the household, then die in the household. If something were to happen to the husband, the women would have no rights. They would get nothing from their marriage, divorce, or death of their spouse, even if the husband wanted them to get something from this event. In some states, a woman could not even spend money without permission from the head of the house, which is of course the man. As soon as the Revolutionary War began, women started doing much of the man's work around the house. This included hunting, trapping, fishing, farming, and running businesses. While the war went on, women started questioning the logic of treatment of the female gender and wondered why they weren't treated the same as a man. They tried to protest, but to no avail, the men would just mock them. The men thought that the women were certifiably insane for believing that they could do everything a man could do. After more protesting and rioting, about 180 years later, the Married Women's Property Act passed. This allowed women to write a will, own personal private property, and let women keep their earnings. Though this was a big step for women, it was still a long way from being totally equal. Then a miracle had occurred as a person stepped into the war for women's suffrage and became a leader and an inspiration to others, supporting suffrage for women worldwide. She has changed women by leading fellow suffragettes to the passage of the 19th Amendment, where women could illuminate the world by voting, equal pay, alimony, and custody of children. A woman from New Jersey was able to achieve triumph through tragedy. She was able to push forth legislation that makes women equal to men in the voting booth, workplace, marriage law, and education. This is Alice Paul, the triumph of the women's spirit. On January 11, 1885, Alice Stokes Paul was born in Morristown, New Jersey, to William and Casey Paul. Growing up as a prominent Quaker, Alice Paul had the same strong beliefs that her parents had. She often went to suffragette meetings with her mother as a child, filled with the belief and interest in the thought that equality was possible and needed a push, always insisting that the world's troubles came from women's lack of potential health. When Alice Paul got older, she went to Swarthmore College and earned a PhD in sociology and graduated at the top of her class. She went to the University of Pennsylvania, earning a degree in biology. Through a scholarship, Alice Paul went to England for social work, and while she was there, she learned further ideas that would allow her to push for the equal rights of women. Paul met Emmeline Pankhurst, the founder of the British suffrage movement, and participated in protests for women's suffrage, including hunger strikes. After 3 arrests for disorderly conduct and disturbing the peace, she returned to the United States with Lucy Burns, ironically meeting as the two were arrested. Paul left and created the National Women's Party to pursue more militant tactics, as they wanted to organize the largest parade that has ever taken place in Washington, D.C. On March 3, 1913, one day before President-elect Woodrow Wilson's inauguration, 8,000 women marched with banners and floats down Pennsylvania Avenue from the Capitol to the White House. After around 500,000 people watched the parade, although some were only there to harass the performers by spitting and mocking, some even breaking the banners and hitting the marching line. Trying a new tactic, Paul and the other women became the first to picket the White House. They picketed the White House for 8 months. President Wilson supported and thought that soon enough women would have their freedom. Wilson sometimes even sent out people to give women coffee or food, which the women kindly rejected. One of the most famous banners said, "Mr. President, how long must women wait for liberty?" After many more months of protest, Paul was sent to jail for 7 months. While in prison, Alice was subjected to several rounds of disturbing treatment. These things Alice endured included force feeding, in which a tube was placed down her throat and food such as raw eggs was dumped down, not to mention the poor sanitation and dreadful living conditions. Some of the doctors at the facility even threatened to send her to an insane asylum. However, tests proved that she wasn't insane, thus unable to send her. Other women that were arrested for the cause and went on the same hunger strike that Alice Paul had organized. Treatment in the facility did not get any better, as they did not let women talk, have privacy, read, write, or any other personal things they would like to do. The jailbirds, as they were called, had only one-size-fits-all clothing, and they were barely allowed to wash themselves, their clothes, or their blanket. Eventually, news on Paul's treatment got out, and sympathy for the women was found. Upon her release from the prison, she organized more protests, rallies, and parades. This finally led to Alice Paul having achieved her triumph, as on August 18, 1920, Congress had finally decided to pass and ratify the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, saying the rights of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States by any state on account of sex. Ironically, the 19th Amendment almost did not pass. Senator Kenneth McKellar was all set to vote no on the passage of the 19th Amendment. However, the senator from Tennessee changed his vote when he received a telegram from his mother asking him to support women's suffrage. After the 19th Amendment was passed, women began to shine and progress unlike before. As Alice Paul once stated, this world crisis came about without women having anything to do with it. If women of the world had not been excluded from world affairs, things today might have been different. Alice Paul's legacy did not end there. She continued fighting for equality, like in 1923 when Paul proposed the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution, and finally on March 22, 1972, the amendment passed. The Equal Rights Amendment stated that there should be no discrimination on the basis of gender. This is a major step towards equal rights, as it allowed women to be on the same footing as men. Around the same time as the Equal Rights Amendment, Title IX was passed. Title IX requires gender equality for boys and girls in every educational program that receives federal funding. Paul worked with the National Women's Party in Washington, D.C. until 1974 due to her debilitating stroke, later passing away on July 9, 1977, at the age of 92 due to heart failure. Alice Paul has changed women by leading suffragists to the 19th Amendment, where women could finally shine brighter than they could before. Alice Paul was willing to sacrifice her own life for suffrage and freedom. This war for suffrage developed an inspiration in many other women to achieve greater things, moving from suffrage to bigger topics in order to accomplish more equality to men, one amendment at a time. Women today are able to accomplish greater things thanks to Alice Paul's triumph. Like the three United States Supreme Court Justices, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elaine Kagan. The first female Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, and the first female United States Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright. Alice Paul's triumph was an extremely significant milestone for women's equality, and without her, where would women be today? Alice Paul had no regrets. She believed that everything she had done was the right thing to do, further stating, "I never doubted that equal right was the right decision. Most reforms, most problems are complicated, but to me there's nothing complicated about ordinary equality. There is still a great difference in genders." Luckily, Alice Paul had given the hope needed in order for women to continue fighting for equality. Alice Paul's story is not over. Her beliefs and ideals continue to be fought for today. Her triumph should be a rallying cry for women all over this nation. A cry encouraging women to take a stand and fight for what they believe in, even if the outcome isn't always what they desire. Alice Paul's triumph is something we greatly need as we reach the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote next year. Let us never forget the struggles and hardship this brave woman went through in order to achieve the freedoms and privileges women have today.